Human walked an alien girl across the silent ridge, and her gentle gift at dawn stayed forever. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's return to our main character. The wind pressed against Evan Cole's cheeks like a quiet warning as he stepped onto the silent ridge, the narrow spine of rock that cut across the high desert and moaned whenever the gusts funneled through its hollow seams. The ridge stretched ahead in pale moonlight, a thin white line against the darker earth, and his boots crunched through a layer of frost that glittered under the stars. Evan wasn't supposed to be here after dark, not with the temperature dropping toward single digits. But his survey drone had gone silent, and he needed it for tomorrow's mapping run. He moved steadily, breath rising in small ghostly clouds, and adjusted the strap of his field pack, digging into his shoulder. The air smelled like cold mineral dust, sharp and metallic. A faint sound made him pause, something too soft to be the wind. He lifted his flashlight, angling it toward a cluster of rocks where the ridge narrowed. That was when he saw her. A young alien girl, small and trembling, her skin a soft blue that reflected the beam like brushed porcelain. She wore a thin travel cloak unsuited for the cold, and one of its clasps hung broken at her shoulder. Her silver eyes widened at the sight of him, bright with fear but also exhaustion, as if she'd been walking far too long. Evan raised his hands slowly, palms out, letting the silence do most of the talking. The ridge groaned under a gust, a low metallic hum that made her flinch back against the stone. "Hey," he said gently, his voice low so it wouldn't get swallowed by the wind. "It's okay. You look frozen. Are you lost?" She didn't answer, but her knees buckled just slightly before she caught herself, and Evan stepped forward on instinct. She shook her head. At first, hesitant, wary, yet she didn't retreat when he shrugged off his insulated jacket and held it out. The cold bit immediately into his arms, but he didn't move until she reached for the fabric with careful, trembling fingers. Up close, she seemed even more delicate, breath shallow, lips pale, shoulders tight from holding in the shiver running down her spine. "Silent Ridge gets colder after midnight," Evan murmured. "Walking alone out here isn't safe." Her silver eyes lifted toward him again, studying him, measuring something she couldn't quite name. Then she whispered her first words, barely audible over the wind. "I thought humans didn't stop for strangers." Evan offered a faint, warm smile. "Guess you found the exception." And on that quiet, frost-bitten ridge, their unlikely walk began. The girl's fingers tightened around the edges of Evan's jacket as the cold pressed in from every direction, and the ridge gave another low metallic sigh that seemed to ripple through the stone beneath their boots. He adjusted the shoulder strap of his field pack again and pulled a small thermal light from his pocket, its glow barely warming the air, but enough to soften the sharpness of the night. "We will head toward the western descent," he said quietly, keeping his pace slow so she could match it. Her steps were short and careful, as if each one had to be earned against the cold. Frost clung to the loose strands of her silver hair, sparkling like thin glass. "What is your name?" he asked after a moment. She hesitated, voice thin but steady. "Liora." The name felt like a soft note in the brittle air. Evan nodded. "I am Evan. We will get off this ridge. There is shelter halfway down. A survey outpost." Liora looked ahead, the path narrowing into a pale curve along the rock spine. "This place sounds alive," she murmured as another hum rolled through the stone. "It is just wind finding hollow space," Evan said, though he understood why she shivered at the sound. The silent ridge had unnerved him the first time too, the way it echoed like a low voice under the surface. A sudden gust swept across them, colder than the last, and Liora stumbled. Evan caught her elbow with a steady hand. Her skin was icy, too cold for the thin cloak she wore. "You should tell me if you are getting too cold," he said. She lowered her gaze. "I did not want to slow you down." "You are not slowing me down," he replied, guiding her toward the wider part of the trail. "Staying warm is more important than speed." She studied him, as if trying to understand a rule that had never existed in her world. They walked in silence for several minutes, boots crunching softly across the frost. The sky stretched clear above them, a deep blue dome scattered with stars sharp enough to feel like needles when he looked too long. Evan noticed her breathing grow uneven and stopped near a rock ledge that blocked some of the wind. He unlatched his pack, pulled out a compact heating canister, and snapped it open. A gentle wave of heat spilled out. Leora's eyes widened slightly. "You give this to me?" she asked. "You need it too." "I will be fine," Evan said. "You are the one who came up here with half a cloak." She almost smiled, the expression faint but real. She cupped her hands around the warm canister, shoulders relaxing just a little as color returned to her face. "Humans," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "Always doing unexpected things." Evan leaned lightly against the rock, watching her warm her fingers. She looked small beneath the sky, yet there was something composed in how she held herself, as if she were trained to hide discomfort. "How far had you walked before I found you?" he asked. Liora looked toward the distant dark, her voice quiet. "Farther than I should have." She hesitated. "I lost the group I traveled with. The storm split our path. I thought the ridge would lead me back, but the night was faster." Evan listened without pressing. The ridge hummed again, a soft trembling through the stone. Leora's eyes lifted toward him. "Will it be like this all night?" "No," he said. "Once we reach the western side, the wind dies down. The ground warms a little at lower elevation." She nodded slowly, gripping the heating canister like an anchor. Evan pushed off the rock and extended his hand to her. The gesture hung for a moment between them, fragile and simple. She placed her hand in his, her fingers still cool but no longer trembling. "Thank you," she murmured. Evan tightened his grip just enough to guide her safely back onto the trail. The silent ridge groaned again overhead, but now she walked a little closer to him, matching her steps to his in the thin, silver-lit cold. The trail narrowed again as Evan and Liora continued along the ridge, their steps slow and steady while the night pressed closer around them. The heating canister in her hands glowed softly, casting a warm circle of light that swayed with every careful step she took. Frost crunched beneath their boots, and the thin air carried a metallic scent that always rose when the temperature dropped this low. Evan glanced at her from time to time, making sure she was still keeping pace. Her breath puffed into the air in small, uneven clouds, but she no longer looked like she was moments from collapsing. The jacket hung loosely around her shoulders, far too big for her frame, but she clutched it with determined fingers. "The survey outpost," he said quietly, pointing toward a distant speck of amber light flickering beyond the curve of the ridge. "About a mile more. The worst part is behind us." Liora followed his gaze, relief softening her features even in the dim light. "Humans build shelters in strange places," she murmured. "This ridge feels like it does not want anyone here." Evan let out a short breath that might have been a laugh. "You are not wrong. It has a personality." The ridge hummed again, a gentle vibration under their feet. Liora tilted her head, listening. "It sounds like a memory," she said, "as if the earth is speaking to itself." Evan had never thought of it that way, but the description stuck with him. They continued, the path sloping slightly downward. The wind eased, no longer slicing across their faces, and the sky shifted from deep blue to something softer, a hint that dawn was beginning its slow climb behind the horizon. Leora's steps grew steadier, though she kept close to him, sometimes brushing his sleeve as she navigated the uneven ground. Evan noticed her gaze drifting frequently to his hands, the way he steadied her when the footing grew uncertain. "You trust easily for someone who has been wandering alone," he said gently. Her silver eyes lifted toward him, reflecting the faint starlight. "Trust is not what I feel," she answered softly. "It is something quieter. You move like someone who means no harm." Evan nodded, accepting the words without pushing for more. Silence settled between them again, comfortable this time. The trail widened, allowing them to walk side by side. As they approached a bend where the ridge curved sharply, Liora paused and looked back at the dark stretch they had crossed. "I thought I would not make it through the night," she admitted. "The cold was very fast." "Cold is patient," Evan replied. "It waits until you stop paying attention. That is why we keep moving." She studied him for a long moment. "You speak of it like it is alive." "Out here," he said, "everything feels alive." A faint tremor of wind rolled across the stones, carrying the scent of dry sagebrush from the lower slopes. Liora closed her eyes briefly, as if memorizing the moment. When she opened them again, there was a softness in her gaze that had not been there earlier. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Not for the heat or the jacket. For walking with me." Evan felt the weight of the words settle in the cold air. He gave a small nod, keeping his voice steady. "You would have done the same." She tilted her head, puzzled. "I do not know if I would have, but I will remember that you did." They resumed walking as the first thin streaks of dawn brushed the horizon in pale orange. The ridge no longer hummed as loudly, almost as if the rising light coaxed it into calm. Liora stepped closer, no longer out of fear, but because she wanted to match his stride. Ahead of them, the outpost light glowed brighter, a promise of warmth waiting in the quiet morning. The first light of dawn stretched across the horizon as Evan and Liora made their way down the gentler slope of the ridge, the amber glow of the survey outpost growing clearer with every step. The cold had loosened its grip, softened by the rising sun, and the air carried a faint warmth that felt almost unreal after the night they had pushed through. Liora held the heating canister close, though now it was more for comfort than survival. Her steps were smoother, her breath steadier, and every so often she glanced at the changing sky with a quiet wonder that made Evan slow his pace just to give her time to take it in. "Humans travel at sunrise often?" she asked softly. "Only when we do not want to freeze," Evan said, adjusting his pack with a small grin. "But it is a good time to walk. Feels like everything starts fresh." Liora considered that, silver eyes reflecting the pale orange haze. "My people believe dawn is when the world reveals truths it hides at night." Evan looked at her, curious. "What truths?" "That we are smaller than we think," she murmured, "and more connected than we admit." The ridge gave one last gentle hum, a soft vibration that seemed like a farewell as they stepped off its highest spine and onto wider, safer ground. The terrain became packed dirt mixed with frost, easier to navigate. Liora exhaled slowly, relief clear in her expression. "Your world is harsh," she said. "Beautiful, but harsh." "It teaches you to respect it," Evan replied. "That ridge especially. It does not care who you are." Liora held his gaze for a moment longer than before, as if she were piecing something together. Then she followed him again, her pace matching his without effort. The outpost came into full view, a small rectangular shelter built from composite panels, its signal light blinking steadily. A thin wisp of heat rose from its vent, promising a much-needed change from the biting air. Liora slowed, studying the structure. "It looks small," she said. "Small," Evan agreed, "but warm." He approached the access panel and keyed in his code. The door slid open with a soft hiss, releasing a wave of heated air that wrapped around them like a blanket. Leora's eyes softened. "Your shelters feel alive too," she whispered. "Alive in the way they protect." Evan stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter first. She hesitated for only a second before crossing the threshold. The interior lights flickered on, warm and steady, illuminating metal surfaces and storage crates neatly arranged along the walls. Evan sealed the door behind them, shutting out the last breath of ridge wind. Liora stood still for a moment, letting the warmth sink into her cold, numbed limbs. Her shoulders relaxed, and a faint color returned to her cheeks. "This is kind," she said quietly, running her hand near one of the heat vents. "You carry warmth with you. You build it where there is none." Evan removed his gloves, feeling his fingers finally thaw. "Humans make things to survive. Places we probably should not be exploring in the first place." Liora turned toward him, her silver eyes gentle. "You helped me survive a place I should not have crossed." Her voice stayed soft, but the meaning rested heavy in the air. Evan looked at her, noting how the jacket hung almost comfortably now around her shoulders, how her posture held a little more strength. "You would have found your way," he said. Liora shook her head lightly. "No, but you did not need me to. You helped anyway." Evan opened his mouth to respond, but she lifted her hand, a small gesture asking him to simply let the truth settle. The heating system hummed around them, steady and calm, and for the first time since he had found her on the ridge, Leora's expression carried something other than fear or strain. It carried trust, and a quiet warmth of its own. Warm air pooled gently around Liora as she stood near the heating vent, her silver eyes half-lidded in relief. Evan watched her from the small workstation, checking the outpost's power readout and the weather monitor mounted above it. The ridge behind them glowed faintly in the early morning light, visible through the narrow window, but the shelter held the quiet hum of machines waking with the day. The temperature will rise soon, Evan said, glancing at the monitor. We can rest for an hour, then get you down to the valley trail. It is safer there. Liora nodded, drawing the jacket closer as if it carried its own reassurance. Your shelters feel like they hold memories, she murmured. Warm ones. Evan tilted his head. They hold coffee too. That may be what you were sensing. She blinked, curious. Coffee. A human morning ritual, he replied, opening a compact cabinet and retrieving 2 insulated cups. It helps you feel awake even when the world is still half asleep. He poured the dark liquid, the scent filling the small room like a gentle reminder of normalcy. Liora leaned closer, studying the rising steam. It smells alive, she said, taking the cup he offered with both hands. It feels like heat you can drink. Evan smiled. That is close enough. She sipped it carefully, her expression shifting in surprise at the warmth that spread through her. It tastes like the earth, she whispered, searching for the right description. Deep. Bittersweet. A good cup usually is, Evan said. Makes you pay attention. The way she held the cup, cradled between her palms, made him realize she was still learning how to experience simple comforts without bracing for disappointment. She stood quietly for a moment, letting the warmth settle into her. You said we would rest, she said softly. Does that mean we do nothing? For a little while, Evan replied, taking a seat on the edge of the workbench. Sometimes resting is the most important thing. Liora walked slowly toward the window and looked out at the ridge they had crossed. The hum had faded with the dawn, leaving only the soft glow of first light brushing along the stones. Last night felt endless, she said. Like the darkness was stretching itself to see how long I could walk. You walked longer than most would have, Evan said. You did not stop. She turned back toward him, the early sunlight reflecting in her eyes. You did not stop either. He shrugged lightly. Someone needed to get you off that ridge. Yes, she said, her voice quiet but certain. But you chose to do it. The statement lingered between them, simple and steady, like the warmth radiating from the vents. Evan looked down at his cup, turning it slowly in his hands. He had helped people in rough conditions before, hikers caught in sudden storms, researchers who pushed themselves too far, but something about guiding Liora across the ridge felt different. He felt it even now, in the way she watched him with a gentle curiosity mixed with gratitude she did not quite know how to express. What happens now? She asked. Evan set his cup aside. Now you rest. Then we find your group. They are probably at the base camp in the valley. Liora breathed in slowly, as if gathering courage for what came next. I hope they are safe. But if they are not, she stopped herself, gripping the cup tighter. Evan stood, crossing the few steps to her side. He kept his voice low, steady. We will figure it out. One step at a time. She looked up at him, her expression softening. You make everything sound possible, she whispered. The outpost hummed around them, a quiet rhythm of heat and light holding the morning together. And for the first time since he had found her on the ridge, Liora's posture eased not because the cold had faded, but because she felt safe standing beside him. The outpost's gentle hum settled into a steady rhythm, almost like breathing, as the warmth continued to push away the last traces of the night cold. Liora stood near the small window, watching the morning light sweep slowly over the ridge they had crossed. Evan finished securing the gear in his pack, checking each latch with practiced focus, but his attention drifted toward her more often than he admitted. She touched the glass with the tips of her fingers, her skin faintly illuminated by the soft glow outside. Your world changes colors so quickly, she whispered. Ours changes slowly, as if it is thinking before it moves. Evan zipped the last pocket and leaned against the edge of the workstation. Sometimes it changes too fast. Sunrise here can feel like someone flipped a switch. Liora glanced back at him, her expression thoughtful. You speak lightly, she said. But last night you moved like someone who understood danger very deeply. Evan's gaze lowered to the floor for a moment. Anyone who spends years surveying places like this learns to respect what they can and cannot control. Liora studied him, her silver eyes steady. You say respect. Most would say fear. Fear keeps you alive, Evan replied. But respect keeps you honest. She tilted her head, as if weighing the truth of those words. My people teach us not to slow for others, she said quietly. Every step must serve the goal of the group. You slowed for me. Evan met her gaze, calm and unwavering. Some goals are worth slowing for. Liora looked down at her hands, clasped loosely in front of her, absorbing the meaning. The heater clicked softly in the background. The room felt warmer than before, not just from the machines, but from something steadier growing between them. Evan stepped toward the door panel. We should leave soon if we want to reach the valley before the sun climbs too high. It gets hot fast on the lower trail. Liora took a breath and nodded, but she did not move immediately. Instead, she approached him with measured steps, her posture unsure in a way he had not seen before. Evan, she said softly, why did you help me? It was not a challenge. It was an honest question, shaped by a world that had not shown her many gentle choices. Evan considered his answer, not wanting to rush it. Because you were alone, he said simply. Because you were cold. Because you needed someone. Liora blinked, almost startled by the clarity of it. But that is not a reason for most people. Maybe not, Evan said, but it is enough for me. She held his gaze, emotions flickering briefly in her eyes like shifting reflections on water. Then she nodded once, slow and quiet, as if something inside her had settled. Evan opened the door, letting in a soft wash of fresh morning air. Liora stepped out beside him, her shoulders straighter, her breathing steadier. The ridge behind them was calmer now, no lingering hum, no restless wind. Ahead, the trail wound down toward the valley, where sunlight spilled in warm ribbons across the earth. As they began the descent, Liora walked a little closer, not because she feared the path, but because she wanted to match the rhythm of his steps. And for the first time since they had met on the frozen ridge, she carried not only gratitude, but a quiet confidence shaped by the warmth she had found beside him. The trail down the ridge warmed quickly as the sun lifted higher, sending wide beams of gold across the valley floor. Evan adjusted the straps of his pack and glanced at Liora, making sure the heat was not wearing her down. Her blue skin caught the morning light in soft reflections, but her steps were steady, her breathing calm. They had been walking for nearly an hour when Evan noticed the subtle shift in the air. The wind that had followed them all morning quieted, replaced by a stillness that felt almost too complete. He paused. Liora stopped beside him, sensing it too. Something is wrong? She asked, her voice low. Evan listened. No hum of the ridge, no rustle of brush, not even the distant call of valley birds. Just stillness. He scanned the horizon. The weather system is moving faster than expected, he said. Sometimes warm air rushes up the valley around this time, and it can push cold pockets back down. We should move a little faster. Liora nodded, trusting his judgment without question. They continued down the trail, but the silence deepened. A faint shimmer appeared in the air ahead of them, like heat. Mirage but colder, sharper. Evan reached out to guide Liora behind him out of instinct. What is that? She whispered. A pressure drop, he said. Cold front pushing through. It can sweep across this slope fast. He remembered the weather alerts he had skimmed the night before, warnings about unpredictable temperature swings. He had hoped they would reach the valley before any change hit. A thin wave of frost shimmered across the trail ahead, rippling like silver dust. Leora's breath caught. It is beautiful, she said. And dangerous, Evan added. Cold that comes this fast can freeze surface moisture. The ground might get slick. As if the world had heard him, a slight crack sounded from beneath their feet, the thin frost forming a brittle sheet over the dirt. Liora wavered. Evan caught her arm, steadying her immediately. You are all right, he murmured, tightening his grip just enough to keep her balanced. She looked up at him, her expression steady despite the quickened rise of her breath. I am not afraid, she said. I just did not expect the earth to move under me. It is not moving, Evan said gently. It is changing. There is a difference. They took the next steps more carefully, their bodies angled to keep weight centered. The frost thickened for a moment, then began to fade as the sun pushed harder against it. The moment passed, but Liora remained close, her shoulder brushing his every few steps. Evan slowed just enough to let her walk beside him in comfort. Evan, she said quietly after a long stretch of silence. This world teaches lessons without speaking. My people would say that is unkind. I would say it is honest, he replied. She considered that, then nodded. And you move through it as if you know how to listen to it. Evan shrugged. All it requires is paying attention. Liora looked at him with a softened expression, one shaped not by gratitude alone, but by understanding. Then last night, she said, her voice almost a whisper, you were listening to me the same way. He glanced at her, surprised by the clarity of the observation. You needed warmth. You needed someone not to walk away. And you chose not to, she said. Her words settled into the morning air with gentle weight. The valley floor grew closer. The sunlight widened around them. And as they walked toward safety, Liora stayed at his side, not because she feared the trail, but because she had learned the quiet truth of someone who listened even in the coldest dark. The valley air warmed as the sun climbed higher, brushing the trail with soft gold and turning the frost into faint threads of mist that drifted across their path. Evan kept an easy pace, careful not to rush Liora as they moved closer to the lower plains. The ridge behind them looked gentler from this angle, almost peaceful, as if the night's hardships had been folded away with the shadows. Liora walked quietly for a long stretch, her gaze drifting between the earth beneath her feet and the distant curve of the valley ahead. Her steps were smoother now, no trace of the trembling that had followed her through the night. Evan noticed the way she kept one hand lightly touching the jacket he had given her, as if it carried something more than warmth. The camp should be over that rise, Evan said, pointing toward a small hill that marked the valley's edge. If your group followed the usual trail, they will be close. Liora nodded, but she did not speed up. Instead, she looked at him with a contemplative expression, the sunlight turning her silver eyes into soft, bright mirrors. Evan, she said quietly, if I tell you something, will you hear it the way you heard me last night? He slowed his steps. I will try, he said gently. She inhaled, steadying herself. My people do not allow individuals to fall behind, but they also do not stop for someone who cannot keep pace. When I lost them in the storm, I thought they would wait. They did not. Her voice was calm, but there was a quiet ache beneath it. Evan felt it settle into the morning air like a thin thread pulling tight. Maybe they did not know you were separated, he offered softly. Storms make it hard to see, hard to hear. Liora shook her head. They knew. They were afraid the cold would slow the entire group. So they kept moving. Evan stopped walking. The wind brushed past them, carrying the dry scent of sun-warmed earth. Liora turned to face him fully. I have been taught since childhood to be useful, she said. To be efficient. To bring strength to the group. If I fall behind, I bring danger to others. That is what they believe. Her fingers tightened around the jacket. But you walked slower for me. You carried warmth for me. You did not ask what I could offer in return. Evan met her gaze, steady and warm. Liora, not everything is about what someone can give back. She studied him, her expression shifting gently. Then what is it about? He considered her question, looking at her with a softness shaped by the long night, the frost, and her quiet resilience. It is about doing what is right, he said. It is about choosing kindness when it is the harder choice. Liora lowered her gaze, absorbing the words like someone receiving truth in small pieces. My people believe kindness is inefficient, she murmured. That it slows progress. Evan nodded slightly. Maybe sometimes it does. But it speeds healing. Leora's breath caught just a little, not from fear or cold, but from understanding. The valley stretched wide before them now, sunlight spreading in long, warm bands across the earth. She looked at Evan again, her voice soft but clear. Then what you did for me, it has changed more than last night. Evan felt the sincerity in her words like a quiet pulse. You did the hard part, he said. You kept walking. She stepped closer, the distance between them easing into something new, something steadier. I walked, she whispered, because you walked with me. The morning settled into a peaceful hush around them, and for the first time since she had appeared on the ridge, Leora's posture carried not just trust, but a gentle strength returning from somewhere deep within her. They resumed their path toward the hill, side by side, the sunlight guiding them toward what waited beyond. The rise at the edge of the valley came into view just as the sun settled into a soft, warm glow across the plains, painting long shadows behind Evan and Liora as they climbed the final stretch. The air carried the scent of warmed earth and distant brush, gentle and steady, nothing like the biting cold of the ridge they had left behind. Liora walked slightly ahead for the first time, her steps lighter, as if the night's weight had finally loosened its hold on her. Evan watched her carefully, noting the way her posture had straightened, the way her movements now carried quiet confidence rather than exhaustion. When they reached the top of the rise, she paused, letting the wind brush across her face. Below them, the valley spread wide and open, dotted with low shrubs and scattered patches of golden grass. A faint trail wound through the terrain, leading toward a cluster of temporary shelters arranged in a half-circle. Their pale surfaces reflected the morning light like soft beacons. "That is their camp," Liora said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They made it." Evan nodded. "Looks like they did." She stood still for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the small settlement. Her silver eyes reflected both relief and something quieter, almost wistful. "I thought the night would end differently," she murmured. "I thought I would not see them again." Evan shifted his pack and stepped beside her. "You made it through. That is what matters now." Liora turned to him, studying his face with a gentle weight that made the air seem still. "Evan," she said softly, "there is something I did not tell you. My people do not encourage gratitude. They believe it creates weakness between individuals. It is considered unnecessary." Evan lifted an eyebrow slightly. "And what do you believe?" Liora looked down at her hands, then slowly opened her palm. Resting there was a small crystalline shard, no larger than a pebble, but glowing with a faint internal light that pulsed like a memory breathing. She held it carefully, almost reverently. "This is an oral fragment," she said. "It contains a memory from my lineage. We pass them forward only in moments of great meaning." Evan hesitated, lowering his voice. "Liora, you do not have to give me anything." "I know," she said. "That is why I want to." She stepped closer, her hand rising gently. The shard glowed brighter as she placed it against the center of his palm. The warmth surprised him, not hot, but soft, like the echo of a distant voice carried through light. "This memory belongs to my mother," she whispered. "The sound she sang to me the night before I left home. It is the gentlest thing I have ever known." Evan closed his fingers around the shard, feeling it pulse faintly like a heartbeat. "Liora," she shook her head softly. "You gave me warmth when I had none. You gave me safety when I could not find my own. And you walked through the cold without asking for anything. In my world, this is how we honor someone who changes the course of a life." Evan looked at her, the morning light outlining her features in soft gold. Leora's expression held no fear now, only calm sincerity. "I will remember you," she said, "long after this valley and this journey." The wind swept gently between them, carrying the faint promise of the day ahead. Evan slipped the shard carefully into the inner pocket of his jacket. When he looked up again, Liora offered a small, peaceful smile. She turned toward the camp, her steps slow but sure, as though she carried something new within her. Evan followed at a distance, giving her space for whatever reunion waited below. And as she walked into the sunlight, the ridge far behind them, the quiet glow of the shard warmed through the fabric over his heart, holding the memory she had given him, a gift shaped by kindness and morning light.